we've had a single TikToker, a single influencer generate 39 million views within 30 days on TikTok. Just to put things in context, the opening night live, which is the biggest event of the year in gaming, generated 40 million views across 42 games. 42 games. And we generated 39 million views on our game with a single influencer in a month.
Yeah.
Right? That's the power of the brain.
So I want to welcome Bertrand Vernizeau, who is the CEO of Game Seer Venture Partners. Game Seer is a boutique venture fund that is exclusively focused on indie PC and consoles. And Bertrand, the reason I wanted to talk to you is, although you call yourselves a venture fund, my understanding from our conversations is you invest quite differently and you're structured quite differently from what many people would think of as a traditional VC investing in games. So we'll get to that. But first, I wanted to just dig a little bit into your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing today.
Right, sure. So actually, both questions can be answered into one. The background and the track record and why we invest differently stems from how we entered, the game industry, which was pretty unique. I would say it like that because my partner and I joined my partner's company in 2014. I've been working with him since 2012. But basically, Michael was involved in the birth of real money trade online, with virtual currencies in a vast area of games, so over 150 games in the end when the company was sold, and also game distribution and digital game distribution. So we saw the evolution from physical to digital of video game distribution, and we saw the birth of virtual economies with our former business. So we exited that in 2015. It was 2015's Germany's biggest tech exit, and why we decided to do things differently, mainly because we did not know what venture capital was, what VC was. So we just decided to experiment on our own, I guess.
So I guess following up from that, so you guys had a bunch of money from this prior exit, and then so do you have outside limited partners, or is the money all really just you guys the sole source of the funding for the fund? Because that would be a very key difference, of course.
Yeah, of course. So we're completely boutique and private, so we do not have limited partners. The reason for that is when the company was exited, in 2015. When you have a big exit, I think the last thing you want is just to start another business and have a lot of employees again. And from that on, we thought, okay, we're just going to remain independent. We're not going to take external LP because we don't want to have to justify an investment to somebody else.
Yeah, I can certainly say that from my limited experience running a venture fund, there are two jobs. There's the investing job and there's the fundraising job, and they are both pretty time consuming. And so I think it's understandable wanting to spend less time on the fundraising and more time on the investing. But the mid 2010s, the story of the 2010s in games really is you could say this the major theme would be just the explosive growth of mobile, but it seems like you guys have been focused pretty much exclusively on PC, console, Steam, that part of the audience. So I'm curious, what drove the decision to be focused there as opposed to other more emerging platforms that had maybe stronger platform-driven growth?
It's a very good question. Actually, it's a common sense matter for us. The reason why we didn't go into mobile was because we had sold 30 million games on PC and consoles, and we're like, okay, we understand what sells in PC and consoles. We don't understand what sells on mobile. We're not acquainted with that market, and we couldn't find a justification for us, despite all the growth, because I think we were allergic to hype. And I think this is something that has really defined us over the years. And it's actually one of the reasons we didn't go into Web3, we didn't go into NFTs, we didn't go into whatever the metaverse was. And it's why we're not going to AI today. It's just that, look, we made money selling PC and console games. And we're investing our own money into PC and console games. It's as simple as that. It's very simple to understand.
So we've seen quite a lot of VC money has arrived in PC and console over the last few years, and that's a relatively new phenomenon. There have been venture-backed PC console game companies in the past, going all the way back to EA. But what sort of feels to me has happened over the last few years is, as mobile has become this red ocean and it become a lot harder to get those sorts of venture scale returns, a lot of what we've seen a number of VCs do is sort of pivot into PC. And we've seen a lot of venture money flow into game companies, making often live services games, though not exclusively. I would say that the sort of the results of that experiment, it's still a little early perhaps to render a judgment, because many of these studios have not shipped yet. But I would say that so far the results have been mixed. We've seen quite a few distressed companies, some acquisitions that really were kind of fire sales, and not really a ton of success stories. And I sort of wanted to maybe use this as a jumping off point to explore how you approach investing in this category. What's your assessment of what's been done well, what's been done badly, and what can we learn from what we've seen so far?
It's a good question. Again, when I see some movement, I see, the reveals. I see, the fancy venture beat reveals of fundraisings and all that. It's always kind of like, it makes me smirk a little bit. Not in a
what makes you?
Yeah.
Why does it make you smirk?
It's just that there's been, I think, even pre-COVID and up to now, up to recently, there was a glorification of fundraising. Like I raised 10, 20 million at whatever pre-money valuation. I think it was actually a PC game, David, that I saw. I saw it around. Somebody from GDC scouted that for me, sends me the deck. They're raising 30 million, and I see a valuation which seems completely crazy. And I see 1 month later, that group of investors announce the round and say that this studio is worth $1 billion. Okay. And I was like, what is this? And I've seen this a couple of times, and it always makes me smirk, because if I take a look at the last 5 years, which PC game has been an enormous success with, let's say, venture backing, and let's say, after LVP and with Supercell, what is like the big unicorn that you've heard of? I have not, I have not yet heard, that a VC-backed studio make a big splash. There's some that do decent. Outside of mobile, yes. So we're talking PC, right? We're talking PC, and I've seen plenty of investments that I did not understand. I've seen plenty of huge funding rounds and stuff that I really didn't understand. So when I see these well-backed PC companies, I'm kind of like expecting or looking for what they're going to achieve. All while on the other side, I see indie productions, go through the roof and gross $200 million over 3 months. So that's the thing, right?
So let's just dig in on that a little bit, because I think the one way you could describe the influx has been these quite large funding rounds going to often US or often US based teams, who are led usually by people who have pretty interesting track records. They are they've been in some sort of leadership position on a usually large scale success of one sort or another. And the argument, the argument, I guess, has been, well, these people have done it before in some fashion. Therefore we trust. We think they're going to be a good steward of capital to create. If we give them the resources, they can run things how they want. They can develop their own channels to market, what have you. That they're going to build a really valuable company. So on the face of it, I think particularly if you were sort of presenting this argument to people who might invest in a venture fund, that would seem like a pretty reasonable, defensible hypothesis. What about that? What are the flaws in that hypothesis from your perspective?
It's very simple. Do you know the soccer team Paris Saint-Germain in Paris?
Sure.
They're very well backed. They have a lot of Middle East money. They purchased some of the best players, and they never won a Champions League. They never won a Champions League. So I live in Geneva. There's a lot of money in Geneva. I had lunch the other day with a family member of a multi-billionaire family, very down-to-earth guy, and he's like, well, I have like 300 million. Help me at some point invest in gaming. I was like, well, cool, but I'm happy for you. It's nice to have 300 million, but I'm not the person that's going to help you invest. Again, because I'm independent. The problem is for such a person, going to a California-based VC that has 1, 2, 3, 4 billion AUM, and that says oh, we're going to invest into this team because they're ex-Riot Games, they're ex-Blizzard, they have that track record, etc., etc. It's a nice story for them because it kind of like mirrors how they invest in other sectors and in other verticals. If you take a look at in Geneva, people are very keen on med tech and deep tech, clean tech, and all of that, and they do this because this is usually a good instinct, right? It is the best people that make the best companies and the best games. But the problem with that is that while it's true in some other industries, and I can't really talk for other industries because I'm not proficient at, investing in aeronautics or whatever, but in gaming, it is somewhat different. Because you have the fact that a video game is like a movie, it's like a fashion show. You cannot just make it with Ivy League people or with people with extensive track record at super famous companies.
So counterpoint, you could look in the movie business, and now a high-profile creator, so take a Steven Spielberg, for example. You have people who are actually capable of reliably delivering. Not they don't have no one has a 100% hit rate, but you do have people who are capable of delivering reliably, just hit after hit after hit. So I'm curious if you have thoughts on what's different. What's different about the games industry that makes that less of a sure thing, perhaps?
Sure. So I would say two things. There's a difference between a new team that is going on its debut title with an extensive track record and an established studio, because this is different, right? But then we're talking very different valuation, right? Let's take, if I take a look at Ghost Ship Games in Denmark, or I take a look at Shiro Games in the south of France, or Sobo in the south of France as well, those companies are above, I can't really disclose which one, right? But all those three companies are all above 100 million, in pre-money valuation. So there's also that. They're established, the chemistry works, and they're delivering hit after hit. Yes, absolutely. But since we're talking about, debut games, new teams that are assembling that are getting seed funding or early stage funding, the argument is completely different. They have to prove that they are able to create that chemistry that is necessary for hits. It was a case, for instance, for Supercell. Supercell delivered hit on mobile, they delivered hit after hit after hit. But I have yet to find a VC-backed PC team that has been providing multiple hits, at a planetary level for now. Mainly because it's tough to do. It's very hard. And, Palworld, the studio behind Palworld, was very open about that. They said that, if they had been well financed and well backed, then they probably wouldn't have had the pressure that they had in order to deliver it and make Palworld. The company was at 21 years old. That honed its skill on Roblox. So Content Warning, which sold 1 million copies in it within a day, is a very tight-knit team of 3 developers from South Africa that were doing a game jam. Manalord was a single dev that got help from Hooded Horse. The list is just long. It's just a sector. It's just a domain. It's just a vertical where the chemistry you can create within a team matters more than your track record, at bigger companies. That's my opinion. But also on the market, on the companies that are grossing the bigger amounts, again, we can take Arrowhead as well with Helldivers 2, and they were sub 100 when they did it, or we can take Larian with the enormous hit of Baldur's Gate 3, which exceeded, $1 billion gross. Again, those are not VC-backed structures. Those are not, those are just teams with great chemistry.
Yeah. I think Baldur's Gate.
And you're a VC. I'm hammering.
No. This is exactly why I wanted. This is exactly why I wanted to have you on. I think Larian, technically, I think they have Tencent as one of their investors, but I think I take your point. They definitely fit the mold of a team that has been. It seems like the thing that sort of unites many of these teams is they've been iterating often in the same sort of design space over a long period of time and really perfecting their craft there, and probably also building a building a reputation with building an audience, also building a brand around the studio and the kinds of games that they make, which I think is maybe underappreciated. I mean, From Software being a great example of a studio that now everyone knows what a From Software game looks like, and there is a huge audience of people that will just buy whatever the next game is.
Yeah, they do. I think it was Sony and Tencent that were fighting for shares of From Software. Those very established, studios. Again, I wouldn't put, Larian or any of those studios I mentioned before. Since they're already established, they've had multiple hits, right? So then at that stage, it's fine, to get a strategic investor. There's a lot of reasons for
sure.
That.
Yeah. It's a different thing, and I think
exactly
the key one of the key things when you take a strategic like a Tencent is, I think we haven't explicitly discussed, but VCs, there's a time. Time is an important dimension here, right? Venture is really in the business of finding companies that can grow very quickly, and it seems that rapid growth is in some ways maybe antithetical in a lot of cases to what a successful game company looks like, and I think that's something I struggle with a lot. So it feels to me like there's a bit of a reconfiguration. This is obviously a tough time in the games industry at the moment, broadly, I would say. A lot of layoffs, a lot of studio closures, things like that. But I wonder if you think there's something, and as you've just noted, many of the biggest success stories of the part of the year so far are these games that really no one saw coming. Games like Palworld, Helldivers, Lethal Company, and now most recently Black Myth, Wukong, which again was a relatively small team. I think it was about 100-person team roughly, which is not tiny, but relative to the kind of the Ubisofts of the world, pretty small. And at the same time, we've seen quite a few launches this year. I won't sort of name names, but many from AAA publishers that have been pretty much dead on arrival. And so I'm sort of curious: is this just the nature of things, or is there something going on in the audience or in the market? Is there something changing? And if so, what is it?
Well, I mean, we assess all day indie productions, right? So they're different than AAA productions, but I cannot judge productions and their processes because those are just huge. I just as a player, the thing is before, let's say 5 years ago, when you were an indie studio, the players had a lot of a point of comparison, AAA productions, and you had to compete with that. Devolver was Mike Wilson was very vocal about that, saying, "Well, we have a $300,000 game that needs to compete for attention with a $100 million game, and it's not easy." Now the problem, I guess, is as well, the scope of productions of AAA's. If I take a look at Star Wars Outlaws, I was taking a look at that yesterday, and again, it seemed very botched. It seems pretty bugged right now. So there's as well, as far as not only the type of gameplay that is offered, but it seems that there's some technical issues right now, for instance, on some productions over at Ubisoft. And players are not accepting that. They're definitely vocal about it. They want products that are refined. So indie productions, on the other hand, have way less resources, so they scale down their scope and try to deliver with higher quality on that because that's their edge. That's how they're going to draw attention. If you play a game like Lethal Company, it's pretty buggy. It's not very polished, but even the bugs make it fun, and the innovation in the gameplay is so. It's just both a meme but also entertaining, and it has a lower price point, and it's indie, so players have a higher tolerance towards it. I think it's also really a lot on the side of players, but also I feel that EA having canceled $120 million production this year, I was just shocked to hear about that. How do you get to the point to spend $120 million and you don't yet have a product that you can actually launch commercially with? I think one should take a closer look at processes in AAA productions, because it seems that things got a little bit out of control. And I think this is also partially due to the phase that we just exited. We exited COVID years, we exited an excess of venture capital in many segments, including gaming. We had bad products that were overfunded. We had bad teams that were overfunded. And I think it's just coming down. There's more realism. It's really a sobering process for everyone. And I think that includes AAA, really.
So then maybe this is to turn to the kinds of games you invest in and how you go about it, because I think we've talked a lot about how the flaws we've seen in other models, but I'm curious to, and I know that you spend a lot of time scouting. You evaluate. Well, let me ask you: in a given, say, in a year, how many teams, how many games will you typically assess?
So Thomas, bless his soul, my scout, actually make graphs about it because we have a CRM. We use Atio. So it's on an average over the last 3 years. It's been 1,500 teams. That's the average of the last 3 years.
Per year?
Yeah, per year. Yeah. So right now we're at 4,500. So 4,500 teams over the last 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've 1,500 teams a year. And how many investments will you typically make in a given year?
So over the last 3 years, the highest we invested was 4 per year, and the lowest that we did was 2022. We only invested in 1 team, so it can go low. Again, being boutique and private, you have also the freedom to say, okay, I've seen only stuff that I don't want, and I don't want to invest because I don't have any LPs to justify why we didn't deploy, right?
Okay, so that's very interesting. See, first of all, as an acceptance rate, that's making Y Combinator look easy, like the Harvard acceptance rate. So, and I think that's an interesting point, right? You don't have to deploy. We've got to deploy X amount of capital in Y amount of time. Being able to, so that I think that points to a pretty big and interesting difference in terms of how your capital base plays into your
absolutely. It's vital. It's a fundamental difference, man, because, let me tell you, like, if you give me $10 million and you say, okay, you have 5 years to deploy it, do you not want me to tell you, David, this year, everything we saw sucked. So that's it. Nobody's getting any money. Or do you prefer me to tell you, yes, David, I did invest at least 1.5 million this year because I have to, but what I just put in is pretty average or pretty bad. It has not a big shot at making it out there, so it's basically likely going to screw my carry. Would you want to hear that?
Right.
But how traditional VC works forces you to deploy, and I don't agree with that.
Which is why I think we're seeing. I mean, this is why from the beginning. The goal. This is not to talk about F4, but we've always positioned ourselves from the beginning as not a gaming fund. We invest in. We actually have less than 20% of our capital has gone into gaming for this reason. It's very hard to find things that we think would make good investments. But keeping the focus on you for a minute. So your tiny acceptance rate. So let's talk a little bit about how do you, for those ones where you invest. What are the characteristics that you look for?
So it's really changed over the last 2 years, mainly after not investing in a game called PowerWash Simulator. So that game had very, very, very average, if not to say crappy prototype.
This is
the team
PowerWash
Simulator. Yeah, it's a game that ended up selling 7-8 million copies. It was a £250,000 investment. The team was charming, but it was very average. And I was like, okay.
And so this was a game. This was presented.
Yes. This was pitched to me in 2020, and we almost did it as a sort of a joke. We're like, this is a PowerWash Simulator game. Let's do it. It's like 250,000, whatever. And the team could get up to £500,000. We didn't end up doing it because of contractual stuff, but we validated it. However, this game went completely through the roof. It completely took over Steam. It had up to I don't know how many CC on Twitch and whatever, and it completely exploded. So between the game and the acquisition on £500,000, between beginning of 2021 when it was released and the acquisition by Miniclip in 2024, we estimated that there was about 130 million in pounds in value created, between the acquisition and the sales and all that. So quite a lot of value lost. And I just reflected, how could it happen?
And
How could such a game?
and you had the opportunity to invest £250,000 for.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what the deal structure would have looked like there?
Yes. So it was half. It was a 50-50 on the royalties, no cap, and we also wanted to get
actually, let's pause there for a minute, because I think we've also I think hit on a pretty big difference between the way that you invest and the way that many traditional VCs invest, which is you started talking about royalties. So
yes.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you're investing and what the structures typically look like.
So I said, this deal didn't happen because something related to contracts. It was actually related to equity. So when we told them, so it was between us and Square Enix, which ended up signing the game and making all the big bucks. James was like, please send me the term sheet. Please send me the term sheet. They were strapped for cash and they pushed for the term sheet.
James
and
being the
CEO. The studio was a property of James Marsden and Kirsty, their husband and wife. Mm-hmm. And they were really strapped for cash. Books weren't looking too good, but that game had something. So we said, okay, you know what? You can get the money you want. They wanted £250,000. You can get more. I think we said you can get another £250,000, whatever, if we sell 30,000 copies in the first 2-3 months. I don't know. I don't remember. And they were like, sure. 50%. What they liked with us is that we didn't touch the IP because we provide a debt financing or project financing with other instruments on the IP. And we wanted a subscription right. So we wanted to be able to purchase the 10% of the cap table at a future valuation. And this had been a company that has had, I said,
when you say at a future valuation, at a valuation you wanted to set at the time of your investment.
Correct.
So you wanted a cap, basically, like a valuation cap or something of that nature.
We're to give you without being too specific, I would say we were telling them we want to be able to buy 10% of the company at 5 million pre-money, something like that.
Okay.
And at the time, the books were really not looking good. So I can tell you that this offer was very good. However, the deal didn't happen in the end because James said, whereas it's a husband and wife business, it has been for 13 or 12 years. You have to come to London, we'll hash it out. So they plan to take the train from Brighton. Long story short, we couldn't meet because COVID, because then it was a lockdown and I couldn't go. But as far as value created between 2020 and 2023 over, not even 2 years and a half, we were talking probably, as far as royalties, something like 20 to 25 million pounds over a 250,000 investment. So you can do the math. And as far as the chunk of equity and the 10% on the acquisition by Miniclip, I can tell you that this was 100 pre. So again, 10% of that, you can add a frisk 5 to 10 million. So let's say 35 million pounds, give or take, over £500,000, 3 years, basically 36 months.
So a good 100x or thereabouts. So abstracting away from the specifics of that deal, and I know we were talking about
right? Why invest?
But we were, but actually, I want to, before we even do that, I want to stay on the thing that we still haven't talked about exactly, which is most people, for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, typically VC is an equity game. So typically we're, the deals that we do at F4 and many of the other VC firms is they are really about ownership of. We're not talking about royalties typically. So we're buying a stake in the studio, and we make our money when the studio is acquired or goes public or something like that. Whereas, please correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the deals that you do, first of all, there's a royalty component. So as soon as the game hits the market and starts selling, you are starting to recoup your money. And then it sounds like you in some cases you might have some sort of option to purchase a stake in the studio as well. So quite a different structure. And again, for anyone listening that doesn't know, a traditional venture fund is not really set up to. We don't really want revenue. We don't want royalties because my treadmill just started talking to me, which is occupational hazard, I suppose. Okay, I don't know what is going on.
California take.
It's at any given point in time, anything in the room can start talking to me, and I don't know why. So again, coming really because we have all of these LPs in many different countries. Our structure, we really do not we are not set up to take in revenue, because that creates distributions which are tax inefficient and create all sorts of problems, basically. But your model is really, the royalties are really front and center. So talk to me a little bit about that structure and what you see as the advantages there for the kinds of investing you do.
Well, so there's always a cash now, so project financing for the project with or without publishing. We also created GameSeer Publishing as a label, so we created this for fun, and then we had more views than the opening night live last month on our last game. So I guess this was the right move. But we have project financing with or without publishing, so that's cash now for your video game, and we have two other options which are related to the cap table. One is a conversion, right? If the investment doesn't go well, if let's say on the debt side it doesn't go well, the game doesn't sell well, that debt after a certain point after the commercial release of the game will be converted into equity with a given valuation that was previously agreed. That's, let's say, on the bad case scenario. And we have another scenario which is on the brighter side of things. Let's say things go through the roof and we basically made a bet on the company with a subscription, right? So let's say we say your company's on the conversion side is going to be worth, let's say 3, 4, 5 pre, that we're going to convert our debt. But let's say you go through the roof, we're going to go and offer you an option for like 10 or 15 pre. And then we cap both options so that, founders have an idea of what our potential presence on the cap table can be.
I see. So in a scenario where everything goes well, you are making money partly from the royalties, and then also you also have some sort of capped option to purchase a stake in the studio at a decent, still pretty reasonable valuation, but sort of convertible debt, so you can then convert into you get kind of more of an equity kicker effectively.
Correct.
So that's really interesting. You've touched on this. It's much closer to a publisher model than a VC, really.
Right.
And it strikes me that, again, a pretty big advantage in that if you look at just sort of the time it takes to, at the end of the day, if you measure you can measure everything in terms of internal rate of return, right? And like how quickly do you get your money out? It's definitely a much faster cycle than venture. So and you also said that there's an optional publishing dimension to that. So can you talk to me about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically to cover value and get value wherever you can. If somebody is very established, they just want project financing and they don't need publishing, you can give it to them. If they're a debut team that is very good in production, but they're not good with marketing, then you give it to them. So we have some very established people, some very seasoned people that join us, as part of our label. And, we tailor every team. Basically, what does the team need? Do they need somebody that's very good on Steam? Do they need somebody that is very good in retail? Do they need somebody that is going to take care of influencers outreach? You just take a look at what they want and what they need. So again, keeping our label very lean, it's mostly consultants. We just clip consultants, they're very seasoned, very experienced, and we tell them, what do we do with the team as far as marketing? Because it also is very linked to how we invest. Again, going back to the example of PowerWash, the game is just a constant stimulation of the prefrontal cortex and triggers sensory meridians. So this is why the game got so big. It's taught.
Okay, hey, wait. I can't let you drop that sentence and then not ask you to explain. So let's talk about sensory meridians and
sure. Yeah, I mean, this is what we look for ever since PowerWash. Because you said, what do you look for when you invest?
Yes.
It's that. Because for me, the publishing label we created is mainly exploiting the TikTokification of everything, basically. And for me, video game marketing is dead. But the only thing that I bring to the table is a good product, because it's going to sell itself. And then marketing is just veering the ship one way or another, but you're not controlling momentum. You can just control slightly the direction and what you're telling to your crew and people who are watching the boat, basically, which are your customers and players.
First of all, unpack for me what you mean by the TikTokification of everything.
Well, I think that the TikTokification of everything, to me, is basically that you're competing for attention. This century is a competition for attention. When you play a video game, you're not watching Netflix. When you're watching Netflix, you're not playing a video game. So you have the prefrontal cortex.
Sometimes you're doing both at the same time.
Right. So you have 5 seconds to catch somebody's attention. The prefrontal cortex is on very short cycles. You don't need half an hour to know that something is boring. Your brain figures that out very fast. So it's the same for everything. When I learned a couple of articles that TikTok was working like gambling. That basically you gamble your time and your attention, and potentially you're going to have something that you're interested in. So I thought, why shouldn't gaming work the same? And some studios figure it out earlier. A studio in Sweden called Landfall Games make games that are mostly physics based. And I thought it was very interesting because I thought, why is physics based so big with them, and why are they so big? Well, then I discovered that through anticipation of movement, you have both the prefrontal cortex that is locked in for attention, and you have the sensory meridians that are triggered because your brain responds to symmetry, your brain responds to sounds, your brain responds to anything that is going to lie. So either you're able to embed everything that triggers the brain positively in your gameplay, in your game design, in your artistic direction, etc., etc. So you're basically giving crack to the brain through your game, and then the marketing is easy because it becomes viral, or it's DOA basically.
So this is fascinating to me. This is fascinating to me because this is people a lot of the time. People talk about genre and design, whatever else, and this is really a completely different way of thinking about what makes things work. But I think a lot of people will probably intuitively understand what you're talking about because you sort of know it when you feel it. To me, like the thing that springs to mind is I think about like Peggle and like how your brain feels when you're, when you have a shot that's kind of ping-ponging everywhere, and that seems one of a great example of a game that's just done an incredible job of making your all of your pleasure centers light up while for a long time while you're playing it. So then talk to me then about how that, or maybe we should focus in on, let's go back to, so this thing didn't work out with PowerWash Simulator. You wanted to do it, deal didn't really come together. But maybe let's talk about a game that you have invested in quite recently that seems to be experiencing some real success, which is a game called Half Sword. So maybe just take me through everything from how you found that game in the first place to how you became interested in it, and sort of and how that plays into your hypothesis or your approach to finding stuff.
Well, it was just that with Thomas, my scout, we were writing notions after notions about, trying to classify everything that in a game design is triggering the brain, either through the prefrontal cortex or the sensory meridians. So he scouted in November Half Sword and through Steam. He was just we parse, we scout, we crawl Steam, so we kind of like watch everything that happens there. And he's like, hey, there's this thing, and we both played the demo, and it was just frankly ridiculous because it was so violent, but most importantly, the game feel of the demo was centered around
maybe
physics-based.
just for anyone who's listening that has no idea what Half Sword is, maybe just give us a quick give us the elevator pitch for what the game is.
It's a medieval fencing simulator game, basically. So you're playing your character and you're engaged in combat simulation, in the Dark Ages, and it's physics-based. So the game is developed in a quite unique way because everything in it is just physics-based. It has a weight, it has a resistance, it has all that. And when you play it, through anticipation of movement and control of the character, your brain is constantly triggered. You cannot just look away for even a second. You need to control your character. It's very challenging. So it ticked all the boxes of, hey, this locks the prefrontal cortex and this triggers the sensory meridians every second. So the justification then to dive deep and to see what the team planned was there, And so when I talked with the team before it were beat last month, so we signed the game. Obviously, we decided to invest beginning of February. 2 weeks later, we invited the team to Stockholm, my partner being in Stockholm, and after a long night in a medieval bar of Stockholm with a lot of mead and a lot of hungover,
very
Yeah, we signed the deal. They were like, yeah, we want to work with you. There was a lot of people because the game had already 400,000 download on Steam, which is substantial. Now we're
So
sitting
the
at
game
one.
is what's right now? Because
It's pre-alpha still. It's
pre-alpha,
pre-alpha. It's a
right? It's not even
prototype.
in early access, right?
No. And we made so we talked with the team and we said, look, guys, I'm going to talk to you about House Flipper, about Supermarket Simulator, and about PowerWash. And they were like listening. They were a little bit spooked at the beginning, but then they listened. And I said, the way we're going to show trailers, the way we're going to show videos is all it's a transition. Everything on TikTok that works is this transition. You go from A to B, from state A to B. I gave them a video on TikTok which has like 175 million views. It's a watermelon popcorn. It's a 20 seconds video where somebody's making popcorn and throwing a watermelon in it, and then the water turns pink and it makes pink popcorn. And I told them, why is this happening? And there's a change of state from A to B, and there's satisfying crisp sounds that were recorded, and this is what people like. Your brain reacts to it. And I said, when we showcase the game, we need the same. You have two characters fighting, they're facing each other. At the end of the sequence, somebody's going to lose their head, they're going to have their head cut off,
Right.
and that is what generates the satisfaction. You saw something, you saw the end result, and the anticipation of your brain was high, but within a short time frame you saw it. And lo and behold, now we're sitting at almost 1.7 million download. We had almost 1 million download in a month after our last beat. And very interestingly, we've had a single TikToker, a single influencer generate 39 million views within 30 days on TikTok. Just to put things in context, the opening night live, which is the biggest event of the year in gaming, generated 40 million views across 42 games. 42 games. And we generated 39 million views on our game with a single influencer in a month.
Yeah.
Right? That's the power of the brain.
Yeah, and that's I think a great way to cap off the definition of the TikTokification of everything. So that's fascinating. I think what you're speaking to there is the power of what goes into capturing attention and the power of that. But you and I both know that that's not all that goes into having a game be successful, right? It's an important, necessary precondition for getting eyeballs on the game in the first place. But clearly, when you're evaluating games, you're also looking at the sort of the longer that you're digging deeper than that. You're looking at the long-term potential. So, what's your framework for thinking about what is going to have some legs that are going to drive long-term retention and word of mouth and all the things that you want to see to have a kind of a durable success?
So, right, absolutely correct. So that's the surface, right? That's how you sell it, right? The brain, prefrontal cortex, sensory meridians. This is the surface and how you lock people. But then again, you need to keep people engaged, over cycles of 5 seconds. So, but you cannot just do this because the game looks good or because it triggers the sensory meridians. So we take a look at loops, synchronous loops and asynchronous loops in a game design. So we have products of reference. I like to quote Hades. I think Hades, does an amazing job at offering, progression to players in a game that again had a very, limited resources.
Which
Hades. Yeah, if you played Hades, it's a roguelite, and it has a lot of progression in each weapon. It has a lot of progression on the character. It has a lot of progression on the dungeon. So basically, it shows you 5 trees of progression that are necessary for you to feel that you're going through a compelling experience.
Oh, Hades. Pardon.
Hades. Yeah, sorry. Hades. Yeah, don't forget
Okay.
I'm French, so sometimes my pronunciation is odd.
Okay, yeah, right. I was like, what's this game? Hades? What? Okay, Hades.
Hades.
Okay, Hades.
So
Yeah,
Hades.
okay, with you. Yep,
but then
with you.
I like to take Subnautica. I like to take Escape from Tarkov. I like to take EverQuest. So it's more like, do we 5 asynchronous and synchronous progression trees or progression loops in the game design offer? If you have 5, you can take as well Risk of Rain 2. You can take we like roguelites because roguelites have this as a fundamental aspect of their game design. Otherwise it's boring for players. So if we see this, we're like, okay, this locks the brain, prefrontal cortex, sensory meridians, and they have comprehensive game loops with at least 5 loops or progression trees for the players to feel that they're having a compelling experience. If we have that, then we're like, okay, this is going to be the ground, the baseline for us to build on, into a product, which is likely going to be an early access and live ops project, because that's where 80% of revenues are right now on Steam. So that's how we do it. That's what we want to see, let's say, before investment.
Okay, so multiple synchronous progression loops, meaning there are multiple sort of dimensions along which you can unlock and progress. You can unlock new options or characteristics. So in the case of Hades, it would be you've got the different boons and all the different branches. You've also got these sort of you're unlocking kind of the environment, I suppose. Weapons. There's anybody's played Hades will understand. So okay, I get what you're saying there. There was a post you made a while ago. I thought you mentioned a framework, in terms of things that contribute to success. I think you used the acronym PEER, PEER, which stands for, and I think it's, if you have these things, you really have really high replayability potentially. And I think that was persistence, emergence, engagement, and retention taken into account across the whole gameplay experience. So maybe you want to speak to that a little bit, like what role that framework is and how it plays into the way you think about what games to back.
So that's like a framework that games like EVE or EverQuest or Escape from Tarkov taught me. How do you like those games? If you ever played Escape from Tarkov or EverQuest or EVE, people right now are happy with when they get players to play 100 to 200 hours. This is already a very good performance. However, if you've ever played EverQuest 1, EVE, or Tarkov, we're talking on average. We're talking 2,000, 5,000, over 10,000 hours. We're talking like insane replayability, insane figures, and anybody investing in a video game wants, ultimately play it to play their games for thousands and thousands of hours. So when I took a look at what hooked me up, for so long on those games, it was that those experiences are extremely persistent. They offer a very compelling set of content and progression. There's a continuum in what they offer. Games like World of Warcraft are the same. The world evolves as your character evolves. So it's very persistent, right? Because the game evolves while you're not in it, and you have a lot to do. And a lot that what you're going to do in those games is going to depend as well on what other players are going to do, right? So that's emergence is going to, persistence and emergence, when they're combined together and well balanced, that's going to generate a lot of engagement. So you're going to be hooked, on that experience. You're really going to be engaged, and you can play really for a long time. And that is what generates, a retention, or the R can be retention or replayability. So that's what I take a look at when I analyze a game as well. It's kind of like, how can it hook you? What are the mechanics that are persistent? How is the emergence generated between the game and the players? How engaging is that? And ultimately, how big is the retention and replayability going to be through that?
And then, so when all of this comes together, can you talk about a game that so we talked about PowerWash Simulator, which you missed. We have Half Sword, which is looking very promising based on the engagement that you're seeing. Actually, let's because I think you've also written recently on how. Talk to me about how you know if all this is leaving aside. Okay, it's obvious if someone gets loads of TikTok views, great. You're being very successful in the attention piece of it. Before and once the game releases, obviously, if you make lots of money, then it's been successful, clearly. But
right.
What talk to me about the sort of the phase that, say, Half Sword is in now, where you've got people playing an early version of the game. What are the key metrics that you look at that help you understand, like, is this going in the right direction or not?
Honestly, average playtime, average session. That's the bigger part. When I see that on average people can stay for 4 hours in the game, I think it's very good. I'm a player, you're a player. If we get hooked for 4 hours in a video game, that's, for me,
especially a pre-out.
Yeah, it's like, it's very systemic. There's almost no content in it. It's just really systemic. So I'm like, okay, they're getting hooked for 4 hours. That's my maximum on a personal level. Maybe my maximum is like 2 to 3 hours actually right now that I'm a dad.
Yeah, right.
But honestly, that is one. And then on a more macro side, I'm looking at CCU, right? I'm looking at CCU and I'm like, okay, we're in top 3, we've been in the top 3 for a month, it's not going down, people are coming back. So that's what I care most about, people
And
coming back.
see, again, just to gloss for people who are listening, that's concurrent users,
Right.
correct?
So those are like the hardest KPIs to trigger. You can make a big splash, pay an influencer for 50,000 and get, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 wishes, and that's it. If people come back to your game and they play it for big sessions, then it smells really, really good. You're doing it right. Half Sword is the first game where it really all came together. Like years of studying it, years of trying and failing, and years of honing or edge as far as what is the justification to make a game. And honestly, I was so happy when I've seen, I think we had 65 million to 60 million views on Half Sword last month. And I was like, the theory is proven. I kind of like felt like this is a theory.
Okay.
We studied House Flipper, Supermarket Simulator, games that went through the roof as well. And we're like, we understand why it's going through the roof. But it was the first game we applied it to ourselves and said, okay, let's throw it out there. Are people picking it up? And then people in the Discord, there's like 50,000 people in the Discord, and they tell us it feels like crack to them. Like the game feels like crack to them. And I was like, holy crap, that this whole theory and all my ranting about, peer and prefrontal cortex and the it seems that it's working. But it was theory, and it seems to be that it's shaping up to be something.
All right, so it's game now. It's game time. Time to
exactly.
to prove out the theories. All right. Well, I think that was a really fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Anything you'd like to leave us with? Anything you want to promote apart from everyone should go wishlist Half Sword? Anything else you'd like to share with the people listening to this?
Well, thanks for the invitation first, David. It's very nice of you for having me. The only thing that I guess I want to share is to anybody that is investing in video games out there, looking to invest in video games. I've listened to Ian Livingstone tell to a group of people at a conference where was that 2/3 of whatever he did in his life failed. And it's somebody that is a knight. He was one of the last person to be anointed by the queen. He is somebody that we owe Dungeons and Dragons, Fighting Fantasy, Warhammer. We owe him all collectively a lot. And he was very nonchalant about it's fine to fail. It's completely fine. So don't let it affect your mental health. Don't let it affect anything in your private life. Failing is part of it. I've failed numerous times. The success that we're getting right now with Half Sword, sitting at 1.7 million players on the pre-alpha is insane. But it is built on a lot of failure, a lot of headache, and a lot of what am I doing wrong. So it's fine to fail, embrace it. As the CEO of NVIDIA says, just make sure you can fail fast and you can fail cheap. That's it.
Yeah, cheap, especially cheap. Cheap being even the best of those.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Cheers, David. Cheers. Thank you.